Hey there everybody, Eric from Outer Limitless coming at you today with another video. Now if you've been watching my channel, both on my primary Outer Limitless channel or here on Outer Limitless 2, you realize for the most part, in most cases, I cover some sort of a gear item, maybe some sort of apparel, different things that kind of keep the channel moving, but the reality of all this is theory and ideas and different concepts are equally, if not more than important than the gear itself. So in today's video, I'm going to mix it up a little bit, a little more informal. This is kind of a bit of a discussion talking about the concept of your personal protection plan. Now, at this point, when it comes to firearms, I'm really roughly, and I'm still very new, roughly about 2 years into it. So to start, it's been like drinking through a fire hose. More information that I can take in, all the different considerations that need to be made. But finally, after a couple of years and settling into things, having some experiences, gaining some impressions, and really starting to mature, I've had the ability to sit back, analyze things a little bit, and really understand what truly some of this firearms related, and I'd say just mentality, really does mean to me. And additionally, if you are like me, I spend a huge amount of time doing research, watching YouTube videos, listening to podcasts, and trying to enhance my overall understandings of the firearms industry, of firearms ownership, and all the nuances that come with it. And so again, this is an opportunity for some back and forth. If you have good ideas and things to comment and really share with all of us, I really encourage you, please leave some comments below. And so again, today, a discussion on my personal protection plan. And with that said, I have a whole bunch to talk about and a whole bunch to share with you. And if you're interested in hearing a little bit more about what I'm about to talk about, do me a favor, stay tuned. And so again, my personal protection plan. Now I have a number of notes here, things that I've thought about and things that I want to bring up for topics, general ideas, general sort of concepts. I'm not going to get into specifics, and that leads me to my very first point, which is my personal protection plan is exactly that. It's personal. When it comes down to it, you need to do a lot of planning, a lot of organizing, but for the most part, when it comes to personal protection, you probably shouldn't share all the details. So today, I'm talking to you very conceptually. Now, in a video like this, I'd love to illustrate everything that I do, but that's giving away my secrets. That's giving away a huge advantage in my personal protection plan. So that's the first concept, is keep it secret, keep it personal. But at the same time, you might have some very important people that are integral to that plan, or maybe you're trying to protect them too, like your family. So in those cases, you do need to share, and you do need to really teach and train on your personal protection plan with the rest of the people who are involved, yet at the same time, they need to understand the importance. They need to understand what it means to maintain a personal protection plan and keeping some of the important things secret. I'll give you an example just to bring it around. Like if I'm going to concealed carry, my wife asks me if I'm going to carry. Sometimes I'll tell her, sometimes I won't. In fact, I have people that in a public place will ask me if I'm carrying. That drives me crazy. It's like, dude, shut up. It's my personal protection plan. It has nothing to do with them whether or not I'm carrying. They shouldn't know. I don't need them to know. I don't want them to know. And the last thing I want is them talking about it. Don't talk about it. Don't demonstrate it. Keep it personal. That's the whole point of your personal protection plan. But again, when you have people that are important, like your family and your friends, or people that you're trying to protect, within that, you may need to share some of those details. Just make sure they understand why they're being told, what they're being told, so that you can teach, so that you can practice, and you really have that level of security when you need it. Now, some other concepts that I've been thinking about, and again, referring to my notes here, I have different factors. And the main one is thinking about the area and the region that you live in. So, for example, what are the risk factors? What are the vulnerabilities that you have where you live or where you work, or the areas that you tend to go go to, because that might impact how you approach your personal protection plan. It might impact whether or not you carry. It might impact where you park or how you think or the things that you do to prepare ahead of time. That's a big deal. So those risk factors really do have to do with where you're going, what region you're in, and the area that you're subjected to. Like, for example, first off, every area will have its own laws. The state that you live in, even the community that you live in, or the areas that you're visiting will have their own laws and rules that you need to follow. You have to know that ahead of time and what you're getting into. There will be areas where you simply cannot carry a firearm. That's just federal law, not to mention local laws that may apply. So again, this is not meant to be legal advice. This is more about the mentality. So if you have questions on legal specific issues, you will need to do your own research. So again, keep that in mind. The area may impact. So, do you live in a major city? Is it prone to crime? That might influence the way you approach your personal protection plan versus if you're very remote. But if you're very remote, well, what's the response time for police or emergency personnel to get to you? That might impact how you approach your personal protection plan. And beyond that, is the area you're in an attractive target in the first place? If you're in an area that's going to be a target, well, you might want to know that ahead of time. So those are things to think about. Now, beyond that, conceptually, I've thought of many other important things, like, for example, my proximity to other properties, other residences that are around me, because if it comes down to a firearms incident, I need to know not only my target, but the backdrop behind it. I've thought about that. I've analyzed it. I've looked at shooting lanes both within my house, but what that means if, for example, one of the rounds was to go astray and actually leave my property and potentially onto another. I've thought about that stuff. It's important. So you need to know the proximity of your home to other homes. Not only that, but what type of people are these other homes or properties attracting? It's not just about your home. It's about everybody else. Who are your neighbors? Are you familiar with them? Do you know them? Get to know your neighbors, because they are a first line of defense. If you're trying to look out for them and protect them, well, guess what? They're going to look out and try to protect you. I've had it happen on a number of different occasions where my surrounding property owners have been like, hey, pay attention to this, that, or the other thing. And guess what? It's paid off. So get to know your neighbors, know everybody around you, have your head on a swivel, and pay attention to the details. And so again, not only does my property have protections, but maybe your neighbor's properties have protections. Look around. See if they have Ring cameras. See if they have external monitoring and things that you can pick up on. Do they have fence lines and things that will prohibit potential intruders from coming into your property? Do they have dogs or animals? First line of defense and early warning systems. Look at your neighbors, understand them, and think about what they mean in terms of your personal protection plan, because it definitely comes into play. Now I'm going to start breaking down into a couple of different categories. I've thought about sort of active and passive security and personal protection measures. Now this is a little bit ambiguous and it could go one way or another, but I'm kind of sort of breaking it down into things I do actively and things that I've set up that are passive and are going to help me, but I'm not actively managing them on a day-to-day basis. Like, for example, active. My firearms and my personal carry weapons, and then training that goes along with that. And then maybe surveillance and security equipment and my monitoring of that, and what I do every day to make sure that I'm keeping tabs on things. And then beyond that, audible alarms or different, audio or visual clues that would tip me off to things that are potentially going on around my area. But then passive, like, for example, fence lines. Awesome. It's passive. You're not adjusting it or addressing it every day, but it's there and it's a barrier and it's a deterrent, and it might be an early warning system if you need it. How my property appears. Now, that's a huge one. Keeping it clean, keeping it tidy, making it look managed like I'm there all the time. That's another part of my personal protection plan. Don't leave things in the shambles. Don't leave garbage laying around. If it looks like you're not home, someone might think you're not. They're going to try to seize the moment. What about lighting? I've established lighting in various areas for different reasons. Some lights turn on automatically, others I manually manipulate. Now, is that striking the balance between active and passive? Yeah, maybe, but at the same time, I've set up the lights, I have them where I need them, and it gives me that visual clue if I need it. Also, the ability to see when it's dark out, that's critical. Now, other things like, for example, doors and window locks. Now, let's be real, locks only keep out really, I would say, honest people. But to me, it's a deterrent and it could be an early warning sign. So, for example, breaking through a door is going to make noise. Breaking through a window, likely to make noise. If that's the case, the locks themselves did what they needed to as a deterrent or as an early warning system. Now, when it really comes down to it, I'm sure a lot of you are watching because of firearms considerations. That's a big part of this, a big part of it for me. Beyond all these other principles, I'm going to start to work back from kind of the most aggressive to the least aggressive. So, for example, worst case scenario, you're getting into a firearms situation. Well, what are the considerations? And so for me, of course, what's the type of weapon, what caliber, and what is the capacity, not to mention what ammo do you need, where are you going to store it? And for that part of the conversation, storage can be a little bit tricky because A, do you keep it with the firearm? Do you keep it separate? For me, I have my own ideas. What about where it's maybe in proximity to children? For me, I have a different consideration because I do have children. I need to be careful, and I really need to manage things very specifically, which I do. That's a big part of my personal protection plan. Not just for me, but the safety and well-being of everybody else, including my family. And the other thing, when it comes to firearms, I mean, what about when you're home? But what about when you're on the road? Two completely different scenarios. So when we look at it from home, I've already started to talk about crossfire, target isolation, and the layout and access considerations. Now, I've put a lot of time and thought into my property, into what my shooting lanes are, what I might potentially do, and how I would listen to those early warning systems and get a clue that I have a problem to establish, sort of, I would say, a tactical advantage if I need it. And those early warning systems, again, I mean, are you really talking about surveillance and cameras and alarms? Maybe you have door alarms. That's a great opportunity for an early warning system. A simple door alarm, it's not going to stop anybody from coming through it, but if it makes noise, it could deter somebody from coming in, or at worst case scenario, tips me off that activity's happening and I can get prepared and gain that tactical advantage. And when you're talking about camera systems and things like that, there's a lot of great options out there. These days, systems are coming down in price. They're high quality, high resolution. They can send feeds straight to your phone. Again, that early warning system, not just to tip you off, but then you also potentially have some monitoring. So set things up in a way that you can see all your entrances. Set things up that you can really establish a pattern of direction. So if somebody moves one way, you can tell. If they move another way, you can tell. I can tell you this, I have set everything up a very specific way for me and my monitoring system, so I know exactly who's coming, who's going, where they're going, what direction they're moving, and I can track that. Again, sort of setting things up for that split between the passive and the active monitoring and my personal protection system. Do your cameras pan? Do they tilt? Do they zoom? You might not want to pay the money up front for a more expensive system, but I can tell you it might pay dividends in the end. The ability to pan a camera around or zoom in, identify somebody, grab photos, grab images. Try to determine up front, well, is it somebody who you're worried about? Or maybe it's just your neighbor trying to bring back your trash barrels. I mean, bottom line is you need to positively identify a target, and so knowing it up front could be critical. So buying the right cameras, buying the right surveillance equipment, and buying the right monitoring system will go a long way. It's short money up front for long-term benefits. Is it video only? Is it tracking audio? That could have pros and cons. With all of this, you need to be careful. You need to think about it, and you need to weigh all of this as you build it into your personal protection system. There's going to be different pros and cons that come with all of this. You need to absolutely pay attention to what you're doing, because what could be good for you for surveillance could ultimately be a demise if it came down to an incident. So you really need to understand that. Again, this is not legal advice. It's just considerations and things you need to think about. What about pets? That's another fantastic place for security, early warning and detection, or deterrence. Dogs, fantastic, especially if they bark a little bit when somebody comes to the front door. Now, it can be very frustrating. It can be a little bit annoying, but at the same time, it could be the difference between somebody who tries to break into your home, come into your home, and is an unwanted visitor, or simply turns around and looks for another target. So that's a little more on the active side. Having a pet, having a deterrent, something like that, again, for me, is something that I've thought about, and it weighs into my personal protection system. Now, what about those visual deterrents? An animal is a visual deterrent. Even cameras on the outside of the house could be a visual deterrent. Fence lines, things like that, make it difficult to move or move quietly and not get detected. Another thing to think about, how you park your vehicles. A lot of people might miss that. I am very diligent in how I park. In fact, I back in to almost every single parking spot I ever park in, period. I back in for a multitude of different reasons. For me, ease of getting out, yeah, that's one thing. But another is looking prepared. When you back into your driveway, you look calculated. You look prepared. It's subliminal. It might not be obvious, but it weighs into it. So that's another part of my personal protection plan that I do think is worth thinking about. So how do you park your vehicles? Are they out of the way of your camera lines? Are they out of the way of potential shooting lanes? Is it things that you need to think about up front that can pay off in the end? Of course it is. So it's subtle, but it all makes a difference when you look at your personal protection plan and the system that you're developing, both around your home and on the road. And some other things that we've already talked about, like, for example, keeping your yard clean, mowed, and maintained, your lighting, interior and exterior, doors and window locks, visual deterrents make a big difference. Now, not only do you want to know your neighbors, other things to consider, like, do you know the drivers for your mail service? Maybe Amazon, UPS drivers, FedEx, DHL. This day and age, there's all kinds of people coming to your house. You probably have more people coming to your house now than you ever have with the amount of things that get delivered. Do you know those people? Do you really know who's coming to your house on a daily basis? How frequently? What are they interested in? What are their motives? You think they're just there delivering you a package. Well, I think if you're like me and you've done enough, research or watched enough of the news, you've seen plenty of situations where that can go sideways and go sideways fast. So pay attention, know who's coming, track your packages, figure out when they're supposed to be there, and monitor it. What seems normal versus what looks out of place? Always understand what normal looks like. Normal behaviors, normal activities, normal pace, normal sounds, smells, all the things that your senses take in are telling you whether or not something is going to be okay or might have the potential for trouble. Again, personal protection plan, general awareness, and the ability to identify things and mitigate that ahead of time will always come into play. That's things to consider, things to pay attention to. So a little bit of a head on a swivel, sniff around a little bit, listen, walk into your environment, and look for things that might seem out of place. It could make all the difference. And finally, again, there's a fundamental difference between being home and being on the road. The considerations, the risk factors of your location do change as you change locations. Being in a vehicle, tons of different considerations, even things like what if you got pulled over? What if you got in an accident? All the things that you can really fall into do weigh in on your personal protection plan and your preparations ahead of time. So understanding that, understanding your anticipated activities. Am I going to carry if I'm going to show up to a soccer field and start playing with my kids? Hard to say. It could change the rules of the game a little bit, right? So understanding your anticipated activities ahead of time, absolutely critical in your personal protection plan and how you approach it. And then beyond that, what's your level of concealment while you're on the road? What's your level of storage while you're on the road? How much ammo do you have? And are there restricted areas that you might end up in? It always into how you approach this. You have to think about that. And as somebody brand new to firearms, You might not be trained that way. You might not think that way up front. So finally, for me, taking a step back and really being able to absorb, not at this point am I just simply worried about the gun, worried about the storage, worried about the ammo, worried about the training and the practice and the range time. I'm becoming more mature. I'm thinking about things differently. I'm developing plans and integrating this all together into something that really makes a difference. It's the culmination, quite frankly, of all the things we're doing for research, all the videos that we're watching, the training that we're getting into, the range time, the proficiency with the firearms. What's the purpose? If it's for a personal protection plan, you need to build a personal protection system, and that's what I encourage from all of you. And so again, I'm sure you have a lot of great ideas, great things to add to this discussion. I'm very interested in this. I would love to hear from you. What are some of the best things that you bring to the table? Show some ideas. Let us hear from you. I would love to see it in the comments below. And so, all right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that. A little bit of a change of pace, getting into a little bit of theory today. Very fun. I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I'm very happy to share it with all of you. And so moving forward, I will have some additional follow-up. A couple other concepts coming out of this that I haven't quite talked about. We'll get into a little bit more detail, and I think you're going to like it. And if you like this content, do me a favor, take a look at my Outer Limitless channel, which is more of my primary gear. On that channel, I cover everything from hiking, camping, and backpacking excursions, all the gear that goes with it. So from sleep systems, shelter systems, knives, axes, backpacks, flashlights, you name it, that's my Outer Limitless channel. And so, all right, guys, thanks for stopping by. I hope you like what you saw. I hope you found it a little bit informative. If you like what you saw, please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Take care now. I'll see you soon.